time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
For years, palace insiders whispered that one day a private meeting would take place so significant that it could permanently alter the balance of power inside the monarchy. Few believed it. Fewer still expected it to happen now. But just 3 minutes ago, reports emerged of a closed-door summit between King Charles and Prince William, a meeting so secretive that even senior aides were reportedly excluded. What happened inside those walls may have changed Prince Harry's future forever. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The first whispers came like a warning through the palace corridors, quiet, controlled, and loaded with fear. This was not described as a routine conversation between father and son. It was called an emergency summit, a private royal reckoning, the kind of meeting that happens only when the future of the crown feels threatened. According to those close to the situation, security around the meeting tightened almost instantly. Staff were told not to ask questions. Aides who usually handled every diary note, every briefing paper, every polished palace phrase, were allegedly kept at a distance. That alone sent a chilling message. Something serious was unfolding. Something that could not be softened by public relations or hidden behind familiar smiles. At the center of it all stood Prince Harry's remaining access to royal foundations, the charitable networks that once helped define his public image and gave him a place within the wider royal mission. But now, those same connections had reportedly become a source of concern. Behind closed doors, William arrived carrying more than papers and duty. He carried years of frustration, disappointment, and the heavy memory of a brotherhood that had once seemed unbreakable. For William, this was no longer only about family pain. It was about protection, control, and the legacy he believes must be secured before it is damaged beyond repair. Charles, meanwhile, faced an even darker burden. He was not just a king making an institutional decision. He was a father being forced to look at one son's future while standing beside the other son's demand for order. That tension turned the summit into something far more powerful than a meeting. It became a test of loyalty, leadership, and survival. As rumors began to spread, one phrase reportedly echoed again and again among insiders. A historic decision had been made. No announcement had yet been delivered in full. No carefully written statement had explained the damage. But the mood around the palace had already shifted. Those who understood the weight of royal silence knew what it meant. Harry's role inside the charitable world connected to the monarchy was no longer secure. It was being reviewed, measured, and possibly cut away. And if that is true, then this was not just another family dispute. It was the opening move in a royal separation, with consequences still hidden beneath the surface. But the shocking summit did not emerge from nowhere. It was the result of years of growing tension, private disappointments, and a royal relationship that had slowly reached its breaking point. Before royal foundations became the center of controversy, there was something even more valuable at stake: trust. Behind public smiles and carefully crafted statements, a deeper conflict had been unfolding for years. What began as family disagreements eventually transformed into questions of loyalty, responsibility, and control. By the time Charles and William entered that private room, the foundation of trust between Harry and the institution had already begun to crumble. In the beginning, Harry's connection to royal charitable work had been one of the strongest parts of his public identity. It gave him purpose, respect, and a sense of belonging inside a system that often felt cold and unforgiving. Through royal foundations, he was seen not only as a prince, but as a man trying to build meaning from pain. Yet behind that success, cracks were forming. As private family tensions grew louder, the people responsible for protecting the monarchy allegedly began asking harder questions. Could Harry still represent royal causes while standing outside the inner circle? Could his influence remain attached to the institution without creating confusion? And most dangerous of all, could the palace trust that those connections would never be used against it? Those questions did not appear overnight. They built slowly, through every strained conversation, every public silence, every moment when old wounds were reopened instead of healed. William reportedly watched this change with growing concern. To him, royal foundations were not just charity projects. They were part of the monarchy's moral shield, proof that the crown could still serve people beyond titles and ceremonies. If that shield became tangled in family conflict, then the damage could reach far beyond Harry himself. It could touch the future William was preparing to inherit. Charles, however, was trapped in a more painful position. As king, he had to think about structure, duty, and public confidence. As a father, he could not ignore the emotional weight of cutting Harry further away from the world he once belonged to. That conflict made every warning sharper. Senior advisors allegedly urged caution, telling him that delayed decisions could create deeper problems later. They feared that public perception might turn against the monarchy if boundaries remained unclear. They feared that influence without responsibility could become a dangerous shadow. And so, royal foundations quietly became more than organizations. They became symbols. Symbols of who was trusted. Symbols of who still had access. Symbols of whether Harry remained connected to the royal mission or stood permanently outside it. For William, the issue was becoming impossible to ignore. For Charles, it was becoming impossible to delay. The family story had shifted into an institutional crisis, and once trust began to collapse, every remaining link had to be examined. Yet even as tensions escalated, few expected the situation to reach the explosive moment that reportedly forced Charles and William to make a final decision. According to insiders, the summit took a dramatic turn when confidential reports were placed before both Charles and William. These documents allegedly contained assessments, warnings, and projections that painted an alarming picture of future risks. What exactly was inside remains hidden from the public, but sources claim the contents were serious enough to transform a discussion into an emergency intervention. The moment those reports entered the conversation, the mood reportedly changed. This was no longer a father and son speaking around old wounds. This became a hard examination of risk, influence, and the fragile reputation of royal charitable work. Advisors had allegedly gathered concerns that could no longer be dismissed as gossip or emotional reaction. They were said to be looking at foundation governance, public trust, outside influence, and the danger of unclear access. For a monarchy built on image and control, even the smallest uncertainty can become a storm. And this time, the storm was not forming outside palace walls. It was forming inside the family itself. William reportedly studied the warnings with a cold seriousness, seeing not only the present problem, but the future one. To him, the question was not simply whether Harry still cared about the causes connected to royal life. The question was whether any royal foundation could remain protected if someone outside the working structure still appeared tied to its influence. That fear cut deeply, because the foundations had once been proof of family unity. Now, they were becoming evidence of division. What had once looked like shared purpose now carried the risk of mixed messages, public confusion, and reputational damage. Charles, according to those familiar with the mood, was shaken by the weight of the findings. Not because he had never heard concerns before, but because they were now arranged in front of him with brutal clarity. Every warning seemed to point toward the same conclusion. Delay would not heal the issue. Delay would only make the palace look weak, uncertain, and afraid to act. Yet acting meant pushing Harry further from the royal system. That was the pain Charles could not escape. His heart may have pulled one way, but the crown demanded another. Then came the fiercest debate, reputation versus family loyalty. Could the monarchy protect Harry's emotional history with these foundations, while also protecting their future? Could Charles offer private compassion, while William demanded public boundaries? Senior officials allegedly pressed for immediate action, warning that unfinished decisions have a way of returning at the worst possible time. And in that private pressure, something shifted. The room began to understand that the issue was bigger than one foundation, one title, or one disagreement. It was about control of the royal future itself. As the evidence mounted and emotions intensified, the summit entered its most difficult phase one, where personal bonds collided directly with royal duty. For years, Prince William had remained measured in public. But behind palace doors, insiders claim his patience had reached its limit. During the summit, William allegedly delivered a message so direct and uncompromising that it left the room in stunned silence. It was not simply a recommendation, it was an ultimatum that could reshape the future of royal foundations forever. William's words reportedly cut through the room with the force of years left unsaid. This was not anger for the sake of anger. It was the voice of a future king who believed the monarchy could no longer afford confusion, hesitation, or emotional weakness in matters tied to public trust. He allegedly argued that royal foundations must be protected before personal feelings could soften the decision. To William, these organizations were not loose family projects. They carried the name, weight, and moral promise of the crown. If their leadership, access, or influence appeared uncertain, then the damage would not stay private. It would spread into public confidence. For a long time, William had carried frustration behind controlled expressions and carefully chosen words. But in that private summit, insiders suggest the restraint finally cracked. He reportedly spoke of future generations, of the monarchy his children would one day inherit, and of the responsibility to keep royal institutions clean from endless family conflict. The pain underneath his position was impossible to ignore. Harry was not a stranger, he was his brother. But that made the decision even sharper, because William understood exactly how much history stood between them. Every shared memory made the rupture more painful. Every unresolved wound made the warning more urgent. Charles, sitting at the center of this storm, was forced into the cruelest position of all. One son was asking him to protect the crown. The other son, even in absence, represented a bond no father could easily sever. Advisors reportedly watched a rare display of determination from William, a side that was calm but unmovable. He was not pleading, he was drawing a line. And once that line appeared, the entire discussion changed. The question was no longer whether Harry's access should be reviewed. The question became whether any partial measure would be enough. As emotions rose, the possibility of permanent restrictions entered the conversation. Not a pause. Not a temporary cooling period. Something stronger. Something meant to close the gap before it could reopen. That possibility carried a chilling weight, because it suggested the palace was no longer thinking about repairing appearances. It was thinking about defense. William's ultimatum pushed the summit toward a decision that could redefine loyalty inside the royal family. And in that moment, the future of Harry's connection to royal foundations seemed to hang by a thread. But while William's position was clear, the hardest decision still belonged to the king, and what Charles ultimately chose shocked even those closest to him. Here is the next section. Every monarch faces moments that define a reign. For King Charles, insiders believe this summit became one of those moments. Torn between his role as a father and his responsibilities as sovereign, he reportedly sat in silence before delivering the verdict that would echo across the royal world. What happened next may be remembered as one of the most consequential private decisions of his reign. Charles had spent a lifetime preparing for duty, but nothing could fully prepare him for a choice that cut straight through his family. On one side stood Harry, the son whose name still carried pain, memory, and unfinished emotion. On the other stood William, the heir demanding protection for the future of the crown. The room reportedly grew heavy as advisors waited for the king to speak, knowing that one sentence could change years of royal connection. Charles understood the danger of moving too harshly, but he also understood the cost of doing nothing. If Harry's access remained unclear, the foundations could become trapped in a storm of loyalty, influence, and public doubt. That was the fear pressing down on him. Not just scandal, not just headlines, survival. According to insiders, the final agreement came quietly, but its impact was brutal. Charles reportedly accepted William's position that restrictions had to be drafted, not as punishment, but as protection. Plans were allegedly shaped to limit Harry's access to royal foundation networks, removing the gray areas that had allowed questions to grow. It was the kind of decision no father wants to make, because once written into palace procedure, emotion cannot easily undo it. Those close to the situation believed Charles knew the relationship might never fully recover. But the king also knew that monarchy does not survive by sentiment alone. It survives by control, discipline, and painful sacrifice. In that moment, the summit changed from debate to command. The decision was approved behind closed doors, away from public sympathy and away from Harry's voice. There was no celebration, only a cold understanding that a royal line had been drawn. Charles had chosen the institution, and William had secured the boundary he believed was necessary. Yet the decision itself was only the beginning, because once word started spreading through royal circles, reactions came swiftly and fiercely. The summit may have ended, but its consequences were just beginning. As whispers of the decision traveled through palace corridors, reactions reportedly ranged from disbelief to outright shock. Some saw the move as necessary protection. Others viewed it as a heartbreaking fracture within the family. Either way, the royal household suddenly found itself confronting a new and uncertain reality. At first, the reaction was quiet, almost frozen. Those who heard fragments of the decision reportedly understood that this was not a minor adjustment or another temporary palace measure. It was a signal that the royal family had crossed into a harsher phase, one where emotional history no longer guaranteed access, and blood alone could not protect a role. Senior figures were said to be divided. Some believed Charles and William had finally done what needed to be done, closing a dangerous gap before it could damage the foundations further. Others feared the move would deepen the family wound until even private reconciliation became almost impossible. Inside the household, staff allegedly sensed a sharp change in the atmosphere. Every conversation seemed more careful. Every silence carried meaning. The old hope that time might soften the divide suddenly felt weaker. If Harry's connection to royal foundations could be restricted, then what else might change next? Future family gatherings, charitable events, and private communications all became questions waiting for answers. This was no longer just about access to organizations. It was about whether Harry still had any secure place within the wider royal structure. Those close to Harry reportedly felt the emotional blow before any official explanation could soften it. To them, the decision looked cold, final, and deeply personal. Supporters of the move, however, argued that the monarchy had no choice. They believed the foundations had to be protected from confusion, mixed loyalties, and future storms. In their eyes, William had acted like a guardian of the future, and Charles had made the painful choice that a king sometimes must make. But critics saw something darker. They feared the palace had turned a family fracture into a permanent wall. That is why the reaction spread so quickly. Not because the public knew every detail, but because the meaning was unmistakable. A private summit had produced a decision strong enough to shake the emotional foundation of the House of Windsor. And once that truth began moving through royal circles, one question rose above every whisper, every warning, and every divided opinion. As debate intensified behind the scenes, attention quickly shifted to the question everyone wanted answered: how would Harry respond? For years, Prince Harry's relationship with the monarchy has been defined by conflict, distance, and unresolved emotions. But insiders suggest that this latest development struck differently. Unlike previous disagreements, this decision touched something far more symbolic: his connection to causes and institutions he once helped represent. If true, the summit may have created the most personal challenge Harry has faced yet. The reported news would not have landed like an ordinary palace update. For Harry, this was not just about access, paperwork, or official boundaries. It was about memory. It was about the part of royal life that once gave him purpose when everything else felt heavy. The foundations had represented service, healing, and a chance to stand for something larger than family arguments. To lose that connection, or even to see it restricted, would feel like another door closing in a life already marked by distance from the institution that shaped him. and that is why this moment carried such emotional force. Insiders suggest Harry's reaction became the subject of immediate speculation because no one truly knew which version of him would answer. Would he respond with silence, choosing dignity over confrontation? Would he challenge the decision, viewing it as another painful act of exclusion? Or would he turn the moment into a public statement about loyalty, fairness, and the cost of walking away from royal life? Each possibility carried danger. A quiet response could look like defeat. A forceful response could reopen the wounds Charles and William were trying to contain. And one emotional interview, one sharp comment, one carefully worded message could send the entire story into a new storm. The deeper pain came from what this decision seemed to say about his place in the royal world. Once, Harry had stood close to the center of royal service. He had been seen as a prince with purpose, someone who could connect with people through honesty and emotion. But now, the reported restrictions suggested that even his old contributions might no longer protect his future access. That realization, if true, would strike at legacy itself. What remains when the causes you helped build are placed beyond reach? What happens when the institution you serve decides that your presence is now a risk? For Charles and William, the move may have been about protection. For Harry, it may feel like rejection written in royal language. And between those two meanings lies the heart of the crisis. The summit did not simply limit a role. It may have forced Harry to face the full weight of separation, and it left reconciliation hanging in dangerous uncertainty. But while Harry's response remains the subject of intense speculation, an even bigger question now looms over the monarchy itself. What began as a secret meeting has evolved into something much larger, a defining moment that may reshape the monarchy's future. The reported decision regarding Harry is not simply about one prince. It represents a shift in priorities, power, and vision. As William and Charles appear increasingly aligned, many believe the summit marked the beginning of an entirely new royal era. For the palace, the meaning of this moment reaches far beyond Harry's access to royal foundations. It signals a new order, one where the king and the heir appear determined to move as one force. Charles may still carry the pain of a father, but William now seems to carry the weight of the future, with a harder, sharper purpose. Together, their reported decision suggests that the monarchy is entering a phase where emotional hesitation is being replaced by structure, boundaries, and control. The foundations, once seen mainly as vehicles for service, have now become symbols of authority. Whoever controls them controls part of the crown's public soul. This is why the decision feels so historic. If Harry's access has truly been ended or restricted, then the message is unmistakable. The royal mission will no longer be shaped by anyone standing outside the working heart of the institution. Supporters will call it strength. Critics will call it division. But either way, the image of Charles and William standing together creates a powerful new reality. The monarchy is no longer waiting for old wounds to heal on their own. It is choosing a direction, even if that direction leaves heartbreak behind. For Harry, the path ahead becomes darker and more uncertain. Does he step back in silence, accepting that another royal door has closed? Does he speak out and risk turning a private decision into a public battle? Or does he try, somehow, to rebuild trust in a family that now seems more guarded than ever? Each possible choice carries danger. Silence could look like surrender. Defiance could deepen the fracture. Reconciliation could demand a humility no one may be ready to offer. And at the center of it all stands William, emerging not just as an heir, but as a dominant decision-maker. His influence over the future appears stronger, his boundaries clearer, and his patience thinner. Charles may be king, but this summit has reportedly shown that William's vision is already shaping the monarchy's next chapter. The foundations have become more than charitable networks. They are now battlegrounds of loyalty, legacy, and control. And as the palace moves forward under this new reality, one haunting question remains unanswered. Was this the end of Harry's royal influence? Or merely the opening chapter of an even bigger royal confrontation yet to come? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.